Hey, everybody, listen, I want to talk to you about how to benefit from a bad situation. Now, Psalm 119, verse 67, verse 71, and verse 75, guess what? They all use the word afflicted. Now, the verb afflicted actually comes from the noun affliction. It's a familiar word to many people, but it's an old word. And it means any difficult or painful circumstance. Now, not only do afflictions happen to everyone, but afflictions come in all shapes and sizes. James chapter 1 and verse 2 says, "Count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations, diverse afflictions." An affliction can be something as small and aggravating and intrusive as a head cold, but afflictions can also be something as large and significant as a major illness, an undesirable medical diagnosis, the ending of a relationship, the loss of a job, bankruptcy, foreclosure, eviction, public persecution, rumors spread by your enemies, or things that people should have kept in confidence, but they didn't. Or an affliction at times can seem like some sort of cosmic battle between good and evil, Satan and God, very similar to what we read about in the life and narrative of Job. I read one time somebody wrote concerning affliction that no one ever needs to go looking or seeking for affliction, because sooner or later affliction will look for us and affliction will find us. I am sure that that is true. And if anybody can talk to you about benefiting from affliction or benefiting from a bad situation, certainly I qualify. I can tell you about afflictions, bad situations, and how to best benefit from them. Sometimes our troubles, sometimes our afflictions, sometimes our bad situations come about because we simply make poor decisions. The temptation is for us to assign everything that's uncomfortable that happens in our life to the enemy. But the truth is, sometimes it's just us being chastised by our own choices and having to deal with the consequences of our bad decisions. But then there are other times when we find ourselves in bad situations and we find ourselves dealing with affliction simply because it's the nature of the world that we live in. We live in a fallen world. We live in a world where global pandemic disease spreads like wildfire. We live in a world where our most vulnerable persons, babies and elderly people, get sick. We live in a world where tornadoes ravage homes, volcanoes erupt, famine takes over wide swaths of people and invade communities. And then sometimes we suffer not because we do wrong, but there are other times we find ourselves in bad situations, honestly, because we tried to do what was right, but somebody didn't like it. So even being good and trying to do what is right, unfortunately, it's not always a guarantee that you won't find yourself in a bad situation or dealing with some kind of affliction. But even in that, don't you despair, because there's a way and some things that we can benefit as a result of being in bad situations. One of the benefits of bad situations is that bad situations oftentimes force us to change. Go ahead, be honest. Has there ever been something in your life you know you needed to change, but you didn't change that thing until you found yourself in a bad situation? There are things, there are changes that we know we need to make at times. But the reality is there's some changes that we will never make without an unforeseen stimulus. Imagine the person that know they need to change their eating habits, but it's only until they are diagnosed with some sort of medical ailment that is connected to their dietary choices that they change. There's sometimes people that know they need to stop smoking, for example, but they don't make that change until the doctor tells them they found a spot on their lung. There are people that know they need to change their spending habits, but sometimes they don't change their spending habits until some sort of financial crisis erupts in their life and they're forced to deal with their finances differently. Maybe it's the loss of a job, the loss of revenue or income. There are people who sometimes are involved in criminal activity that don't change until they get caught. And the list goes on and on. So one of the ways that we can benefit from bad situations is because oftentimes bad situations force us to make necessary changes. Another way that we can benefit from bad situations is that bad situations forge clarity. Listen to me. A bad situation will make it very, very clear about who your friends are. A bad situation will make it very clear about what your priorities should be. A bad situation and affliction will bring forth the clarity that you need to reorder your day, to restructure your finances, to reapproach your physical health, your emotional health, your mental health, and other parts of your life. And so another way that we can benefit from bad situations is by opening up our minds to the level of clarity that that bad situation wants to teach us and bring into our lives. We can fool ourselves sometimes. Sometimes we can delude and persuade ourselves into thinking something is real that's really not real. And oftentimes, it's not until we find ourselves facing a bad situation that the line is drawn in the sand for us and we're able to gain a level of clarity about what's real and what's fake, what's authentic and what is superficial. And just go ahead and be honest and admit there's some level of clarity that you would not be walking in right now had it not been for you finding yourself thrust in a bad situation. An additional way that we can benefit from bad situations is that bad situations forge creativity. Right now, the world is dealing with COVID-19 or the coronavirus. But do you know what I'm looking at? I'm looking at people, industries, businesses that are becoming very creative about doing their work. I'm a pastor, and I've had, along with my staff, to become very creative about how we keep in touch with our people, how we deliver our messages to people. And not just me, but I'm watching on social media all of the wonderful, brilliant creativity that is coming forth, that is being forged in the fire of this global pandemic. But not just forged creativity as it relates to the church and ministry and how we approach church and ministry, but also forged creativity as it relates to other industries. I'm watching education go online and school systems become very creative about how they are teaching children. I'm watching restaurants become very creative about how they connect with their customers. Watching other industries, the medical industry, become creative about how they are able to deal with and diagnose and treat their patients. The list goes on and on. Years ago, I heard one of my mentors, Dr. Kevin Cosby, tell the story about a German, I believe he was German, about a German immigrant who made his way to California during the gold rush years. He goes to California during the gold rush years with the intention of making tents for the gold rush participants and the miners. Well, he gets out there and he's got it in mind that he's going to become an overnight success making tents. Well, to his surprise, the miners, those participating in the gold rush, they weren't purchasing the man's tents. So he went to one of the miners and he said to them, he says, listen, I come all the way, I really believe it's German. I come all the way from Germany and with the ideal of making and providing tents for you all. But I notice that you all are not buying my tents. So here he finds himself in what? In a bad situation. But remember, bad situations force change. Bad situations forge clarity. And bad situations forge and bring about creativity. So he says, why are you all not buying my tents? And one of the miners says, it's not tents that we need. He says, well, what is it that you need then? He says, what we need, or we need some pants that when we are on our knees and climbing up through the hills, that the pants, we need pants that will hold up to the rugged terrain and the scrutiny of the rocks that we come across. And so that man took the material that he had been making tents out of, and you know what he did with that material? He made pants. He made jeans. You know what that man's name was? Man's name was Levi Strauss. And that's how Levi jeans came to be. A bad situation ended up forcing him to change his strategy, forge clarity about how to approach the situation, and brought forth creativity to be able to meet the need. There are some ways that you can benefit from a bad situation.